Hello, everyone. Welcome on another Sunday. I got all my maintenance done, so I can be here. Hopefully, you're working on yours. Today, I'm going to start with a question that I think we all run into from time to time, and that is the mystery, why are my fish not feeling so good? So, William says, my fish are gasping at the air, gasping for air, many die-offs, used meds, chlorine remover, did tests. There's no issues with pH, KH, ammonia, nitrite, nitrate. Temp still accurate. Started 2 days after a water change and kept on the same. Any idea what to test for now is the question. So you're probably not going to be able to test for something. This gets into that area where we can only test, maybe up to 10 parameters in typical water for a home hobbyist, and that's if you had extra kits. So in that scenario, what do you do, right? And so our brain naturally tends towards this happened after a water change, and it could be the cause. Could also be unrelated, right? And so what I mean by that is it something physically in the water that did it? Or is maybe the stress of a water change what caused it? Right? And so we need to identify, we can't even identify. We need to figure out, are we afraid of the tap water now? That's basically what we need to figure out. The tap water, because one of the best ways out of something like this, if it's something else, right? Let's say something else in the aquarium somehow, cologne or perfume, someone else in the house dropped something in there. We had motor oil from changing the car oil last week when we did our maintenance. Could be a million things, but water changing is kind of one of the way outs. So, what I would say here, what I would do personally is I don't know if it's a planted tank, but if it's not planted, I would dose fairly heavy salt in probably a tablespoon per 2 gallons or so. If it is planted, I would do a tablespoon per five, and that's just a mild antibiotic. It's a mild anti-parasitic. It stimulates the slime coat because we don't know what's gone wrong here. So I would start with that. I would also get a like carbon pad, and I would fill up my filters with carbon pad. That's going to pull out any remaining meds, but it's also going to pull out any remaining contaminants that we don't necessarily know about. So those would be the first things I would do. I personally would trust my water, especially, I don't know with William here, but if you have more than one aquarium and maybe it's on a Sunday and you're doing all your water changes, if only one tank is having this problem, logic states that it's probably not the water if the water went into multiple tanks, right? Something local to that ecosystem. So I would, maybe do an additional water change, even though testing looks great. Maybe I do a 50% water change, I put that salt in, and I put that carbon pad in, and I watch and I wait. And that's kind of what's going on for us right now. Murphy isn't like eating right now. He'll peck at it, he'll eat a little bit. It's not really, fond of the live food, not fond of clams. And so we just went back to basics. So we removed some plants, make sure he had extra swimming room. We turned down the lights to make sure it wasn't stressful. We did a full-on gravel vac, even though it was clean. We cleaned the canister filter. We added carbon. We did extra water changes. We're soaking the food that he will eat in Vitachem. We're doing all of these things while observing, because that's the best tool we have is to observe. And what I think doesn't get enough credit is just because you watched it for 5 minutes today, it doesn't mean you have the opportunity to see what's wrong. And so it might be an hour every day of like, yep, just does the same thing, swim around, gasping for air. I mean, Murphy's not, but that sixth day you might go, oh, look at that though. That is a different thing that I've now seen, and that might change what I'm doing. Now, in our case, like Murphy still loves to greet people, and most people would have no idea that he's not behaving the same. It's our employees that have noticed it's not eating with as much vigor, and this is going on, and with puffers in general, the long term, if they stop eating for too long, usually it's really hard to bring them back. So catching it early and trying to change it. Now, in our case, and with our employees, we ran into the same problem. The water's testing out fine. Like everything from, we keep 100,000 fish, and all of them are doing fairly well, except for the one mascot, right? And the things that I tell our employees, like, don't rule it out that someone didn't poison it. Unlikely, right? But when you cover, like in this scenario where Williams covered all these normal things, don't rule out, just write it down of like, okay, someone could poison it, right? In our case, a kid could drop something in there. Is it pennies? Is it, oh, I put some of my bubble wand in there or a piece of candy? Like, okay, outside contaminant dropped in, not intentional poison, just something. That's why we actually did the thorough gravel vac. The other thing we wrote down was potentially could something have fallen in there from maybe construction? Like maybe we were working on a light up above, or I know like a month or two ago we installed a new heater. Could we have dropped some screws in there or something that could be interacting? So again, that thorough gravel vac to make sure that it hadn't settled into the sand and we're not seeing something going on. And those were the main ones, right? Because like in our store, we have a whole store full of water and it's all changing water and only one animal is having this issue. So we don't think it's a source water, but we're still making changes. We took out extra clams. We added a wonder shell. You're doing all these things that seemingly may help and we don't know. And in our case, the problem is not many people know. When it comes to these large puffers, when we contact the vet, they're like, well, yeah, we're certified, but we mostly deal in like injecting a koi, right? A lot of what the wet vets do, at least in our area, they're more about you had a whole pond of koi, or maybe in William's scenario here, you have a whole thing of fish, you've now lost a fish. If you can take that fish straight to a wet vet, they can harvest organs and things like that, and you could actually overnight them to a place that will run labs on them. Now, we've been down that road with Hank in the past, and it's very expensive. So we had a necropsy done, but not live labs because one, we didn't have another puffer to save, so it wasn't that time sensitive. And two, each test was like $240. That doesn't seem like a lot, except they're like, well, we have 322 tests we can run. And you're just pulling, because we have no idea what the problem is, right? So you're just like, well, you could start running bacteria cultures, you could start running cell cultures, you could start running, scrapings from the outside of the fish to see if it's parasites. You could just run all these things. You could be $5,000 into it and know nothing more. So as fish keepers, we're in this weird place where the hobby is affordable for most people, but the top end care is not. And for myself included, it's not that you couldn't spend $5,000. It's that without some reasonable odds of finding out what's wrong or finding out while the fish is still alive, it's not a good use of money for most hobbyists. And so, start going down that rabbit hole. Don't rule out things that seem so unlikely. It could be, a family member put something in there or they overfed or completely, oh, they went to the bathroom, they got the food ready, they fed it, there was still soap on their hands, and somehow there was enough soap to cause a problem. You start running into far-fetched scenarios, and so I like to approach far-fetched scenarios with a broad stroke. Let's get salt in there, let's absorb any chemicals. So the good thing is carbon and salt can play together. If you put an antibiotic in there and then you put carbon absorbs the antibiotic. But we need the carbon to absorb anything we can't test for that could be going on, ideally. And the salt won't be affected by that. Now, you've maybe read in the past and could read in the future that salt could release ammonia from like a carbon pad or something like that. But that's why we kind of do these big water changes, fresh pad, fresh salt, so that it wouldn't already be trapped in there. And by the way, we don't dose fertilizers. We start eliminating things. That's all we really are doing. Is it's like if all of a sudden you became very ill in your home, and the first thing, maybe it's something I'm eating, and you might go, well, maybe I shouldn't. I shouldn't have eaten the world's hottest chili 17 days in a row. So you maybe eliminate that. See if you feel better. If you do, okay, maybe I tone down the chili. Oh nope, still a problem. Oh, maybe I try something you're eating or drinking, and you just keep removing things from the equation until eventually you'll be left with a fish and water. And I've been down that road before. I've had a, big group of clown loaches, and it was all my prized fish when I was like in year 2 of the hobby. And I couldn't figure it out because I would change massive amounts of water. It was a 110-gallon tank. I would change 100 gallons of water every day. Ammonia would keep shooting through the roof. I wasn't feeding. And so by process elimination, plants came out, wood came out, right? And each day I'm doing these massive water changes because fish are dying and ammonia is super high. And I keep going, and I almost left the hobby and stuff's still dying daily. And these are big clown loaches, things that I had spent a lot of money on. I had a lot of attachment to. I traveled the country to find them. It was the prize of my collection. And then eventually, because each day is just, at the time, I would go to work, I'd come home, I would change lots of water, pull the dead bodies, put them in the freezer. Um, and that was a tough cycle to be on. And like day 5 or 6, and each night I would Google and go like, well, what could it be? I need to learn more about pH. I need to learn more about this. And eventually I stumbled upon that it was actually the substrate, because that was the only thing left. It was water and substrate and fish were the only things in my tank. And the substrate I had bought was meant for ponds, and it was a substrate meant to grow plants, and it was cheap, where it was like a big old bag was $20, and this was a large aquarium, and I thought, hey, we're going to save money, and it'll be good for growing plants and everything. Well, in that scenario, what had actually happened, and I figured it out, too late. We actually saved a few of the fish, which that's not great, but better than none, was that they had soaked the substrate in ammonia, and going into a giant pond, non-issue. A bag, because it was meant to like maybe put it in this floating planter and things like that, over 5,000 gallons or whatever, no problem at all. Your filters will handle it. Well, you take 6 of those bags, which is a lot, and you make it the entire substrate of your aquarium, that's where I ran into a problem. So, it's a process of elimination, and it's very taxing and irritating, and you're undoing work, like the plants from Murphy's tank. Maybe they've been growing for almost a year now, but like they got to come out. Why? It's not the plants though. I know, but when faced with no other option, right? When you have no other options, you can choose to do nothing and just watch like, yep, it's going to take its course, or you can keep making strategic moves, and that's what we choose to do. And it might be that once we take out the last plant, oh my gosh, there's a broken thermometer in here, or there's, I don't think a broken thermometer would be doing it, but you never know. The more each day, if you gain a little bit more information about what's going on in that scenario, you have a much better chance of solving it. And, I do want to point out, because it's a very discouraging part of the hobby, and that when you lose fish and you tell people in forums and Facebook groups and maybe your local club and maybe in the chat here, it's very common for people to go, well, you should have gone to a vet, right? We kind of subtly judge others and going, hey, at this point, everyone's got a line in the sand, right? And eventually when you trip over that line in the sand that you would draw, well, I would have gone to the vet, or I would have done X, Y, Z. But what actually happens when you get to those points, at least for me and Dean and a few others I've talked to, is we haven't found the answer. So like Dean, unfortunately, lost his fly river turtle. This happened probably 2 months ago. And, the story kind of goes, the turtle was fine, swimming around, eating. Dean goes down to work on his beach condo for, like 3 days. His wife is feeding. His wife says, hey, didn't eat his wafer tonight, or whatever food it was. And so he goes, oh, that's weird. I'll be back tomorrow. And he comes back tomorrow, and sure enough, turtle's not eating. Turtle's a little floaty. And so first thing Dean does goes, hey, have you noticed this behavior with your turtle? And I go, nope, that's probably not a good sign. Maybe we should think about dry docking it, or maybe, obviously watch it do, he's like, I've already done a water change, temperature's good, XYZ, like normal stuff. And he says, well, I'm going to start, trying to get a hold of a vet to see, because the reality is there's not a lot of good information on fly river turtle care on the internet to begin with. But then also being in the reptile world as opposed to the fish world, where we're more proficient, he wanted to try to find somebody to help. And so he was reaching out, and this was, I think it was around Thanksgiving or something, but he was reaching out and he couldn't find an appointment with anybody. And so I think the saga, him, it starts like on a Monday, and he's calling around, and each vet says, "Oh yeah, the turtle's doing what? Oh, it'll be fine. Just don't feed it for a few days. It'll be fine." And he went through all the local ones and even some on other side of the state. And they were also, because he was insisting, like, well, can do you have any devices? Can I bring it in? And they were all booked up. So, he's 6 or 7 wet vets in and hours, because he can drive it down to Oregon too, because it's another state and he has his beach house down there. So, but he kept running into dead ends. And I think finally on Friday he found one that would take it. But unfortunately, it passed away Thursday night. So even though all the medical professionals or vet professionals or whatever you want to call it were like, it'll be fine. Turtles do that. Don't worry about it. He knew his turtle and he knew it wasn't right. And there was really nothing he could do. Now, everybody can play armchair warrior and go, well, I would have done X, Y, Z. You don't know the whole story. You may have already tried that. Oh my gosh, the fireplace isn't on. I'm surprised you guys are still here. And, traumatic. That was what do you want to call it? A holy grail fish for Dean and myself included. And, so nobody's perfect. I've lost Hank in the past. I'm hoping we're not going to lose Murphy or anything like that, but we play with these creatures that well, at least we do, are more and more and more exotic, and they get more and more difficult. There's less and less people in the world that have actually, kept them, right? And so when I was going through the same thing with Hank, the first puffer, every wet vet would just say, I don't know much about puffers. Talk to this one guy. And, that's not a good spot to be when everywhere you call says talk to one guy. And that guy was out of the country. And oddly enough, it's January again. That guy is also out of the country. So, but that's, even when you put everything on one person, they might go, oh yeah, I don't know. They're all, because everyone wants to pass it along, right? Because if you don't know the answer, you want to try to get to someone who does. But the reality is, sometimes no one knows the answer. So, yeah, started out with a long-winded disease thing. I think the criticism usually tends to be the hardest from people who don't keep fish. Yeah, I mean, it's really easy to know, like, well, take it to the vet. I do that for my dog and cat, and most often we save the day. But with fish, the network just doesn't exist, at least in America, and I don't think anywhere in the world and it's also, it's not like we'll take our dogs in for a checkup once a year, right? Maybe they get some booster shots or whatever they need. You might have a fish that's 9 years old, never been to a vet before. The vet's never seen it before. How does it know if it's putting on a little weight or, anything about that fish? They don't. And then their equipment is not designed to be underwater, or, you need specialized equipment, which most don't invest in because there's not the money there. So it's just a difficult spot. And that's why I guess I commiserate with everybody of like, we're all our own little wet vets that we have to just do the best we can. And so, we ask each other and we see what we can learn. When using Fritz slime out, how many doses is too many for the health of fish? I don't think I've run into that problem myself. I would follow the directions, change some water in between doses, but in general, it's, for me, I clean up blue-green algae that I can see, then I dose, then I let that marinate for a while, and then I'll do a water change and gravel vac and remove any other blue-green algae I can see, and then I'll dose it again, and maybe up to 3 times for that. Most chemicals, I don't know if chemical is the right word, most medicines, they have an LDS, so like a lethal dose. Is it LDS? I don't know if it's LDS. LD? Here's just LD. You just don't want to get to that threshold, right? And so that's why most meds will suggest changing water in between. Also, a lot of meds, they lose active ingredient over time. right? And some could happen within hours. Some take years, not years, but like days and months to something like copper. If you just put copper in, copper's just there. It's not going away. Same with salt, but some of the meds will taper off, like an ICX and things like that. So usually in the aquarium hobby, we will just change water. The other example you could use would be, carbon. Some people will do both, especially in salt water when it's really important to get that back out. And, because maybe like in salt water, you might have a med that's driving your protein skimmer crazy. If you don't get it all out, you can't use the protein skimmer. And if you don't have the protein skimmer, you're starting to have some problems with, maybe waste buildup. So, but in the freshwater aquarium, normally we just change water. We change enough so that, and we're fairly, I think most medications are fairly lenient, as in they want to use the minimal amount to treat the thing, and there's a decent amount of headroom before most of the meds that we use would be lethal dosing, because that's one, bad for business, and two, more meds cost more money, and yeah, LD50, that's what it was. Thank you, Mario. I knew, yeah, LD50 and JW Carlson. I don't know why my brain couldn't. Maybe I just haven't talked about lethal dose of meds and stuff for a long time. I will say one of the best possible things you can do. See, here it is. Oh, Camp Keenan seems to have a lot of knowledge and everything. There's a few people in the world that know a few things. But the problem is, and I'll be the first one to admit, what you see on camera is not what you see in person, and knowledge level and all of that. So, like, everyone's got this online persona and they do different things and they have this like, oh, they know X amount about X. But yeah, I'll leave it there. Where was I going with? Oh yeah, when it comes to meds, I think the best thing that we can do as becoming our own little wet vets, right, is store some meds on hand. I don't have any in here because I wasn't going to talk about this today, but I didn't have any reason to talk about it till that question. But I really think having salt, that's really good to have on hand, in my opinion. Maricin, which is an antibiotic. Paracleanse, which is deworming. Also some external parasites. And ICX, external parasites and fungal. With those four things, right? Salt, ICX, Maricin, and Paracleanse. With those four, I keep an entire store running. I keep the warehouse running. I keep my fish room. Every once in a while, it'll be Expel P or some other med like an anchor worm med. I'm trying to remember, Dimolin. But the main four, that's kind of like you have your own walk-in clinic in your fish room. And you're just like, oh, I could treat that, I could treat that, I could treat that, I could treat that, I could treat that. And then you run into these like, oh, I got to get you out to a specialist for that one. And that would be where some of those other meds. And so it's the most unfun part to spend money on, right? It's fun to buy a big filter. It's fun to do a decoration, more plants. It's not fun to go, well, I spent $50 on medicine that I don't even need yet. But think of it like you're buying, you are going to need meds at some point, right? It might not be today, might not be tomorrow, might be 2 years from now. But what we do find is waiting on the mail when you need those meds. Those hours and days really matter. And I've had I call them viral, they just spread really fast, but I've had infections like on guppies and cardinal tetras come into the store where we're putting the fish away in the morning. We get busy with customers and going, okay, yeah, we'll come around by like lunch and do meds. They're already all dead because some of the bacterial infections start moving so fast that when we've studied it, where we looked at it like in an hour and you go, okay, look, what's going on? Yeah, they got a little bit on the fins. You can come back an hour later, it's half the fish. It looks like it's been eaten away. And so when you have something that's moving that fast, that's really when you don't have time to wait. And what we routinely see, and it's unfortunate, is that people wait until they have a sick fish, and then they're scrambling to find medicine, and they will often ask in chat and customer service and forums and all of that, I've got this issue. I couldn't find the meds that Aquarium Co-op recommends and we use a billion times a day. Instead, I found this other med. Will it do the job? And we unfortunately have to say, I don't know, because we don't test it. It's kind of like having a pharmacy or going to the pharmacy. It's their job to know, can you mix these meds, right? The doctor, the pharmacy tech double checks to make sure there's not something going wrong. And just no one in the aquarium industry has ever really done that. We don't have people looking out for the fish's interests of going, hey, can you mix these 3 different brands of meds to do that thing? And so that's where, my advice is to carry those meds on hand. This kind of always escalates to, well, what if you don't live in America? Great. You can still get salt. That's the worldwide one, right? You might be able to get a hold of some copper. You might, like if you're in the UK and there's some specialized treatments there. And part of it might be working with your club or even just you. Corey, how'd you come up with this? I did it. It took me like 8 years to come up with this. And it all started because when we would get, when we would get guppies in at the store I worked at, they would always have a bacterial infection. And we'd watch them die, and the owner would say, nope, we don't use meds. And we'd come in the next day and like, well, we ordered 50, we lost 18 last night. Oh, we better treat for antibiotics. So then we'd put it in, right? And then we'd lose maybe another 5 or 6 that night, and then they'd be stable again. Well, eventually, when I was managing the store and he would just stop coming in, I would just treat from like guppies go in, medicine go in. And then I come back the next morning. Oh, we lost 2 out of 50. Great. And as I kept doing that over and over and over and over again, it learned to be a good strategy. What we found was, I find this to be interesting just for myself. Once we started getting fish living, which seems counterintuitive, right? Like our whole job was to get fish to live. But once, so if you start with 50 guppies, and by day 3, you were already down to 20 or 30, what was left wasn't super healthy either. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't super healthy. And so then you would sell them over time, over the next week or something, and that's where your journey would end. But what was different is if you bought 50 and you then treat it with antibiotic, and over the week you sold 30, you still had 20 for the next week. 20 wasn't enough to get you through the week, so you'd buy more. You'd buy 30 more, right? And maybe if you're good, you put them in a new tank and you'd sell them through. But so guppies might move really fast, but other fish wouldn't move as fast. And what we learned was the longer we kept a fish, even though we were feeding and cleaning them, the more weight they would lose. And that's where I was like, they've got to have internal parasites. And eventually we would treat them with antibiotics. They become stable. Then a week or 2 later, maybe we treat them with Paracleanse. Back then it was General Cure. So metronidazole mixed with prostaquentanol. And then they'd start putting weight back on, right? But meanwhile, the whole time these fish kind of have to be for sale. At least that's the way the shop ran. And so if you bought fish day 2, we got them, well, they never got dewormed. And if you didn't deworm them at home, they eventually would just have the same trajectory at your house. So eventually I started seeing, well, let's see if we can put these 2 meds together. They were from the same company, right? At the time, they were both from API, and I tried it. It seemed to work. And so that's kind of how that became, how I developed it, is trying them together. And what I'm leaving out, by the way, is a lot of things that didn't work. So know that. And I also hired an ichthyologist and them to help us. So that expert comes in, right? And they're like, yeah, here's the best med pack, but none could be bought over the counter. So even though I could go order them all up from a vet and our store could have them, this is when I owned Aquarium Co-Op at this point, I couldn't recommend them to you. And I was like, this isn't going to work. We need to spend the time to develop something that's going to work for everybody, or at least a big group of people. And so you can be doing this in other countries, and yes, does it take time and energy? I estimate that it costs me around $40,000 to come up with these meds that work well together. Because you lose fish when you go, let's try that. That was deadly, right? For whatever reason, tiny amounts of salt are absolutely deadly to like dwarf ink or catfish. Don't know why. And we're talking like a tablespoon into 10 gallons, they're dropping like flies. Whereas every other catfish we have in the same row doesn't care at all. And so these things you learn over time, they pay dividends when your life depends on keeping stuff alive. So, but you can work with others. I tend to do it myself because if they leave something out, it might not be directly applicable to you. But salt's very powerful. I saw someone here talked about carbon. You said copper and salt never leave the tank. The copper I get, the copper I get, but how does salt stay if you keep doing water changes? Well, in that instance, I'm explaining that water changes are the only thing that make it leave the tank. So salt will leave when you change water, same with copper. There's a little bit of, I'm not sure if it's just wives' tale or it actually exists of once you use copper in a tank, minute traces will be there, but in my brain, I would say plants will probably suck that up. But yeah, so there's things that will diminish in power even when they stay in water and you're not changing water at all. And then there's meds and things that won't change strength unless you change water. So, all right. Any tips for live bears with dropsy? Furin 2 was the only med that worked for me, but they don't sell it anymore. Furin 2 should be just Bifurin, which is two different antibiotics, one to target gram positive, one to target gram negative. Let's see if Bifurin. It's still made by like Cory and stuff. It's on the website. Let's see. Bifurin, is it on Amazon? Will they sell it? No. Let's see if I can find somewhere to buy it for you. But Bifurin is very close to Furin 2. Now, this is all from an armchair live stream and not like if I was using, let's say I was a big user of Furin 2, which I'm not, but let's say I was, and I couldn't buy it anymore, I would then be comparing MSDS or SDS sheets and seeing what I could learn. Yeah, but nitrofurazone, usually you can find it on like here's thefishroom.net, and you can buy Aqualife nifurazone or nitrofurazone, which is Furin 2. You can see there's a government website that says API Furin 2 is nitrofurazone powder. I believe in other markets, some of the Asian markets, they call it the yellow powder. But that's a real shotgun approach, which we do also. So just know that that was the only thing to fix your dropsy. Know that dropsy is not always caused by a bacterial infection. It could be, organ failure, could be tons of internal parasites. People often mistake fish being egg bound, which is, I think it was a guppy or just live bears. But, like a betta can get egg bound and they assume it's one of the other things causing dropsy when in fact it was being egg bound. So I'm not a big fan of Bifurin or, Furin 2 or nitrofurazone only because it resets the tank so hard. And my goal is always to work with people at this chain store plus level. So you've graduated from going to, PetSmart, Petco, Big Al's, whatever your normal chain store is, to that next level of care. And in general, when you get with meds that really start disrupting the overall ecosystem of a tank, it becomes a snowball. So I've got one live bear with dropsy, I treat this med, now I've got ammonia spikes, I've got this going on, I have no beneficial bacteria, and then you start losing lots of fish. And so when you're working with a group of people, you start having to make decisions like, well, what's better, to let one fish die and save the rest? I think it is. So you start encouraging like, hey, set up quarantine tanks. You'll see we have many articles and videos about quarantine tanks because once you have a quarantine tank, it becomes very easy to use any med, right? Because you're only, hey, we have one illness. Same thing, when you get very sick at home, you go into your bedroom, or if you're very sick at a hospital, you're getting at least curtained off from the next person. And the more intense it is, the more isolated you are. And so being able to basically set up an ICU unit at home, we've got the walk-in clinic with the 4 meds, which if you don't own those 4 meds and you live in America, you should be adding them to your cart and buying them today. Paraclens, Maricin, Fritz Salt, and ICX. Those meds will get you through so much. So you got your walk-in clinic. But then also, it would not be bad to have like a small little air pump that you bought at a garage sale, any old sponge filter, and like a 5 or 10 gallon tank that just like sits in the garage. So that if you have something go wrong, you can set up that ICU unit. All right, I'm controlling it. Maybe you need an extra heater as well. That might be a thing depending on where you live. And you're ready to actually tackle that. Now, majority of people we deal with, they don't see the value in that. It's not that they don't like animals or anything. They just go, yeah, it seems like that's like over $100 to set it up. And, I got to be honest, this fish is $3. Like, it's cheaper to buy a new one. And I totally get that. Until you're playing with fly river turtle, Murphy, zebra plecos, discus, rare corridoras, rare rainbows, where you start going, oh, this group cost me $700. Then meds seem like a bargain because you're buying back what went wrong. And so I genuinely believe if we're doing our jobs right and you're enjoying the hobby, over time, the value of your livestock will go up. You kept fish alive, you bought some more fish, you found a new thing you like. Ooh, I really want that goby, or I really want that thing, that pleco. And it becomes a scale of like, at a certain point, if you have like $100 in fish, you should just have meds. And that's just purely talking from dollar standpoint. That's not talking about like, well, it's our responsibility to take care of it. If we don't have the same attachment to fish as we do like cats and dogs, but we know that if you can adopt a cat or a dog from a shelter for free, the answer is not let that animal die and go get another one for free. It's, well, you do what your family can afford, right? You might be able to put in a couple $100 or something like that. Oh, we fixed it. That's a lifelong pet. It could also come back with, oof, it's this thing, it's $25,000 to fix and you can't afford it and you'll surrender it. All of these things happen. Everyone's got a different situation. So, but I do think having, some of the minimal precautions will help. Why have so many beneficial meds been taken off the market? So I think that's the way that's stated is a little bit needs some parsing. So depending on where in the country, some places have been illegal. Could be in Canada or the UK or Europe, something like that. In America, what is mostly going on is it's not so much that they become illegal. That I would say that's the minority of the issue. It's the upkeep to produce it. Now, with regulations, and so the only ones I really know is like I work with Fritz, right? Fritz Aquatics. Like their meds. We've worked with them to help develop those meds, recommend product packaging, dosing. It's the cost of the FDA and the site visits and all of these things. And Hikari said the same thing. For a while we were having a big scare on ICX might go away. And it might be, it might cost them in a permit of $30,000 a quarter to produce more ICX, right? And they have to weigh that versus the sales. And so when you have things like, shipping costs going up, other people have entered the market and less people are buying ICX, and they're going, we're not making money. In fact, we're about to lose money producing this medicine, even though the medicine's good and we like it, right? And so we actually saw that happen with methylene blue, right? Yeah. It used to be very easy to buy from Fritz and things like that. The problem was they it became where they were paying way more money to produce it than they could ever make back from it, and so they stopped. So now I think like the only fish producer of methylene blue might be Cordon. They still got it going, but it's like limping along. And part of the problem with methylene blue is like one little bottle is like a world lifetime supply. It's so much. And so it's kind of just like a natural, like, ooh, it's going to be really hard to keep it going. And so that's what we see time and time again. And that's why we see a lot of these herbal remedies pop up. Because an herbal remedy, if it's not using like chemical drugs, doesn't go under the FDA as far as I know. And then also, because it's not using these different chemicals, they can kind of go worldwide. So if we can get a blend of natural ingredients to treat something, it would be very, 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 very beneficial for the world. The problem, in my view, it's my personal view, is I haven't seen anybody do it from what we've tested. And a lot of times, with the cost of R&D, they eventually just push the product out. And what I don't like is there's a lot of these herbal remedies that might treat something very, very, very mild. That, maybe, if I cut my hand, likely it's probably going to heal itself anyway. And so if I cut my hand and I put a little bit of Diet Coke on it, now all of a sudden, like, yeah, cures bacterial infections. Look at that. It doesn't, but you start making some of these claims, you start selling some, and it sells pretty well because it can go worldwide. And not enough companies are really trying to make the product that's going to work. Now, that's probably a little bit unfair, but the money's not in it, I think, is a problem. Like, even if you created the perfect thing, the everlasting gobstopper, the money's not going to be there. And so that's why a company like us haven't tackled it. One, I'm not a chemist. Two, I don't have a lab and all of these things. But we might go bankrupt, or we might spend the next 20 years trying to develop something and it never comes to fruition. And so it happens in the medical world all the time. Like, oh, we're working on a cancer drug. It's been 50 years. Still don't have it, right? But when you do, maybe it pays off. And so I don't think that it's so many beneficial meds have been taken off the market as in, hey, you can't sell that anymore. It doesn't become viable. And part of the problem is the more competitors in a market, the less viable each one of them is. So like for us, we are hyper-focused on the meds that we sell. We want to sell lots of them. We want you guys to buy them. It makes it easy for us to advise you. It makes it easy for us to reorder. It keeps the companies we want to work with in business. But when people go, hey, does Fix-Ix, does this and that and this and that work? I don't know. And some of them I do know don't work. Like, for instance, it would make all the sense in the world for us to sell, what is Fritz's? Is it Fix-Ix? Fritz, Fix-Ix? Is that right? Yeah. In our testing, it doesn't work. We got gallons of it and did A/B testing with controls. So you take 3 bags of Cardinal Tetras, 300 each. We put them in 3 tanks next to each other. Robert did experiments. I guided him because I was trying to guide him into how we would do this. One gets Ix, one gets nothing in the center, and the one on the right got Fix-Ix. We did that 3 weeks in a row. The one with Ix, great. Not nearly as many casualties. The one where nothing, lots of casualties. The one with Fix-Ix, lots of casualties. It was the same as if we didn't do anything. And so after X amount of weeks of testing, we go, yeah, that product doesn't work. And we did it with a couple different species too. So it wasn't just one species. We go, well, maybe like that med just doesn't work on Cardinal Tetras. Maybe it'll work on, guppies or something else. And we wanted it to work because it's so much better when you can put all the money spent with one company and all of the meds come from a company. It's easy, but it didn't work. And so we don't carry it to this day, even though they would love for us to do it. And, I'm always skeptical when someone says, hey, we've got the latest, greatest product to treat this thing, because I know from my testing, 9 times out of 10, it doesn't work. Now, maybe it's in our water structure in Washington. Maybe it's on the type of fish I do. Maybe it's, um, maybe it's something I can't factor in, and because maybe it treats it at the lab every time, right? But I know that for most of the people watching, you guys have luck with what I have luck with. And so if I'm having luck, I can recommend it. If I'm not having luck, I feel like it's not that it could never work, but if it doesn't work for me, I feel like that's going to be fairly similar results for you. I swear Bob Steamfot spends his time waiting for it to be Sunday at noon to text me everything he wants to know. All right. Let's see. Loving the light. Yes, we have a new light, by the way. Oh, by the way, also, I don't have it in my hot hands, but the membership year 4 coin. This is the 3. The year 4. Not too many people have earned that one yet. Yeah. So it's out and about. You could be getting it if you order. Any specific areas you want reviews to touch on? Plants are bright, happy, happy red suddenly when I switch the co-op light. No, I don't want to influence reviews at all. The best thing I could tell you would be if you had questions before you bought the light, try and address those in your review. Because if people are like me, and not everybody is, but when I don't see what I want in the description, I go and I look in the reviews to see, did somebody else have this question or have they answered it for me? If you like the light, great. Post that. If you don't like the light, great. Post that. And there's been some pros and cons and all of that. And that's great. All the feedback together in a culmination is what will help us sell. And the reason why I would ask for reviews is because I'm confident our light is good. Where if a company's not doing well, you just turn the reviews off. And you see it all the time. You show up and you're just like, there's no reviews. That's weird. But we also leave in the bad reviews because I don't think the light's gotten any yet, but if it did, we would, assuming it's fair, and that's, like, oh, you could just say it's not fair. There's a few things that we take reviews down for. If you're leaving a review on a product or something and it has nothing to do with that product, so if you're on the light and you say, my plant arrived frozen, that has nothing to do with that light. That one, we wouldn't let it be there. If you call out Candy or another person by name and are derogatory, we wouldn't allow that. I don't think we ever have it happen, but we probably wouldn't let you, well, I know we wouldn't. We wouldn't let you advertise a competitor. Don't buy the Aquarium Co-op light, buy this Higer light here with an affiliate link. Like, obviously, we're not going to let that through. But everything else, like if it's a fair, if you go, you're like, well, I thought it would be thinner, or I thought it would be whatever. Like, I think it should be cheaper. Those are all valid statements, and we would allow it. Everyone can parse through that themselves and figure out whether they agree or don't agree with that person. What's my all-time favorite fish? I think the longer that goes on, the less I know. Right now, when Bob and I went shopping, we bought a bunch of silver hatchets and glass catfish for a tank we're setting up in our dining room. And that's what my wife wanted, and boy howdy, am I already in love with those fish. They're out in the ICU. They're in my quarantine tanks out in the fish room. And we'll be starting meds on them soon, and they're doing well. So, yeah, I'm excited for those. My headphones just died. No! You got to plug them in. I'll plug mine in right now. I don't even have mine plugged in. How much is it to join the membership? $5 a month. If you're joining on Android or a computer, if you join on Mac OS, I think it's like $7. But you get 5% off the website. There's other goodies and gadgets, and we're working on more things. And so don't worry. We've always got something in the pipeline on everything. So is Aquarium Co-op ever gonna, just know that it's probably in a list under somebody going, yep, when it makes sense, that'll happen in some capacity. Have you ever kept paradise fish? Yeah, they're a very fun, unheated aquarium fish to keep. You can breed them. They're bubble nesters. You can do it like in some of the Japanese style pots or a big goldfish bowl, or people always lose their mind when I say goldfish bowl. He just said a goldfish bowl. I've got a 30-gallon goldfish bowl, for instance. Um, we did on the More Aquarium Co-op channel, we actually visited a breeder, Backyard Aquatics, who had very cool kind of pond setups. Basically, you can kind of uh, breed them the same way, like in the same setups you would rice fish. So they're fun. Oh, Lopez I'm calling you out, Aquarium Co-op. Hmm. I don't know why. Lost in the spam, maybe? Maybe I'm getting called out for my good looks. Could be. Ooh, that's right. 6 days from now. So next Saturday, Oliver Knott is going to speak in the club. It's $5 to join. You can watch all the past talks. He is an absolute master of the aquascaping hobby. In my opinion, one of the OGs. And, he doesn't do public speaking too often. Because he's a friend, we were able to, do it. He's shy about speaking in English. It's not his native language, even though I have conversations with him all the time and it's fluent, right? But it's just he's not as comfortable. The good news is when when you're using terms of aquascaping, they're the same all around the world, right? I don't know him, but what's the fifth stone called? He probably knows. I don't. So, silver hatchets and what? Glass catfish? Yes. How about a live stream from your car, maybe at the parking lot of my local Taco Bell? Oddly enough, I filmed a video that way once. I was gonna do a series that it just turns out to be a terrible idea, I think. But it was gonna be tacos with Cory, and I filmed one little episode, but it was too off-putting for the guests. It was actually with Mike from Aqua Pros, and he was is like, but like the tacos going everywhere. I'm like, that's exactly the whole point of this thing, of like be normal people eating in a car. You've got the shredded cheese and lettuce just kind of like all over you, and you got sour cream on your face, and then I'm hitting you with questions. But I never ended up taking that kind of down the road. I have done live streams though. I know specifically one time, I think on Instagram, I did it from a Taco Del Mar. Back when I would do more airport runs and stuff, sometimes traffic would be bad. I would just pull over, eat, and kind of live stream with you guys. At what point does it become more efficient to heat the fish room rather than the individual tanks? I think it depends a lot on the size of the room and how well it's insulated. If it's really insulated well, it's going to be fairly early in in the equation. Where if like it was in an uninsulated garage, probably way more efficient to heat each individual tank and insulate each tank. There's not really a great formula, I would say. But I do think one of the bigger things that's not thought about enough is, like, Dean's room is a good example. It's not so many tanks. He could go either way, but he chooses to heat the room because when a heater fails, it doesn't really happen anymore in the aquarium, right? So it's his furnace has to go out. Now he does have a specific few tanks for like discus and zebra plecos that get an additional heater, but yeah. So I think the bigger takeaway is the safety of the animals, right? So even though I sell aquarium heaters, if you could heat this, like if I had 10 or more aquariums in here, and I got a lot of windows, so it's not that efficient, and I actually don't have heat up here. That's why I have this little fireplace. So in this room, probably going to make sense to use heaters for a long time. But in terms of like downstairs, maybe in a bedroom that was insulated really well, heating that room probably makes a lot more sense because the furnace could do it and things like that. So, I'm currently using Nylock Thrive, and it's working well, but now I can get Easy Green here in Canada. They're about the same price and amount. Should I switch to yours, and if so, why? Um, I gotta be honest, I'm a big fan of if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So even though Colin is my competitor, if it's working, stick with it. Now, the thing that I would point the difference, the main differences between our two, is going to be that his really wants a lower pH because it uses ammonia in it, and if you're above 6.8, that can irritate your fish a little bit. Where we don't have our nitrates be a derivative of ammonia, and that's because I know the majority of my customers don't want to inject CO2 and keep their pH low to avoid the ammonia irritant. So we develop our product differently. That being said, you got something that's working, just keep doing it. You know, if you set up a new tank, you want to try something, if you come to me and go, Cory, I want to try something new, I'd be like, great, give it a try, right? But, you know, if you already have, like, I love this place down the road for lunch, keep going there. You love it. It sounds good. Do it. Does Microsword do well with established gravel? 5+ years, no water changes, no CO2. I test bi-weekly. Yeah, probably would. You'll have a lot of sediments that have built up in layers in that gravel. And as the roots get in there and start tapping into it, should be a lot of fuel for that. So assuming you have the right amount of light, should do fairly well for you. I actually really do like gravel. Someone, I think in the Facebook group a day or two ago, like, if you had unlimited money, what substrate would you use? In gravel. When I set up my dining room tank, it'll be gravel. We're setting up a 125. Well, that's turtle, so that's going to be like sandy, crushed coral stuff. But I'm a guy that in the fish world, I have unlimited money because it's a business write-off and people will just give me stuff to try. And so I could use any substrate in the world. At most, it's an email. At worst, it's paying for it. I still routinely just set up with crushed coral and normal gravel. I like it. Gravel vacs the best. It's the most adaptable. It allows enough spacing for the roots to really grow in plants. All of these things. I don't have pH issues to fight when I don't have to replace it 2 years down the road when it turns to mud as opposed to clay balls. I like what I like, and so my honest answer is normal sized rounded aquarium gravel that hasn't been painted or anything like that. Just normal earth tones, in my opinion, always looks good. It's never distracting. I don't have to go, it was just getting good. Because in my opinion, a planted tank doesn't even look good till year 2, which seems crazy to so many people that are new to the hobby, or they're an aquascaper that's switching it up for a competition every 6 months. But for me, I like to set, and that's why my tanks, I'm going to admit, look terrible. Because I've moved within the last 2 months, 2 years. And so I didn't like land here and instantly we had to build it all, right? So it wasn't like I landed and just like set them all up and they'll be mature at 2 years. Now we're just starting to really put that mature, or the process in place for them to start maturing out. And it's a lot of money with plants and all that stuff. But that's what you will see over the next year or so. We did a bunch. Zenzo and I spent, 10+ hours on Wednesday working in the fish room, working on Ladybird's tank, the 800-gallon. Then Dean and I came over, or not, well, I didn't come over to my own house. I'm here. Dean came over on Friday, and we put in another 10-hour day and removed a whole row of totes, set up another 125-gallon. Well, I didn't finish setting up, but it's auto water changing and it's got sponge filters. I got to put gravel in it. I think I'm turning it into a turtle tank, so we got some custom things we made. But we're really trying to dial it in so that you guys, if you haven't watched in a long time, you haven't seen any oh, I remember when they had that planted tank in our living room and things like that. You haven't seen any of that. And so I'm just a guy that owns a fish store and a fish company online where I'd like to, you've been seeing more and more tips of here's how I set up tanks. I like them to be easy. I like them to last a long time. You saw in the video yesterday, I like to make pieces that this rock with an Anubias in it will live here for a few years until I go, you know what, I want to do something else. And then all these rocks now get to live in a new tank. And so I'm building pieces that will last for a long time. What about all the pieces you used to have, Cory? Yeah, I used to build these pieces. And they go to the store when I would move. right? So I'd be like, yeah, we'll put them in Murphy's tank and we'll do this, we'll do that. And eventually someone will offer so much money that we don't say no. That rock with all that Java fern, $300. Oh, I don't want to. And eventually you do. Because you know, like, I can make another one. It's just time. And, it just takes a long time. So, what's my take on cuttlebone for shrimp? I have very soft water. In my opinion, it's a waste of time. I've run, in the last 20 years, I've run cuttlebone. I've run experiments. I can't tell any difference. I can tell difference with Seachem Equilibrium, Wonder Shells, Zoomed Plankton Banquet Blocks, other shrimp salt additives, all these things, but I've never, for me, seen a tangible difference when it comes to the cuttlebone. In my opinion, it's too hard. It doesn't dissolve. Like, I've had it where it's like it's been in the filter like 3 years later, like still there, right? So in my opinion, if you had absolutely nothing else, sure, it's probably better than absolutely nothing, maybe. But if you had access of like, ooh, I could buy these products that are known to work better, I would encourage you to do that. I really, so like in my cardinal shrimp tank that you saw yesterday, I put in a Wonder Shell this week to just bring up the mineral count even more. I'm also using crushed coral, and then I'm going to be adding some more cardinal shrimp to it. If my plants have started turning black, is there any way they will come back, or do I need to trim them? Most often, if they turn black or get holes, they don't come back to their full glory. You could trim them. I like to just let them be consumed by the plant and provide nutrients, though. Do I have any experience with Beta rubra? Yeah, I've read Beta rubra. Not too difficult to do, but betas, like the wild caught betas are fun. Simplex is fun. Album marginata is fun. The strawberry beta. Tight fitting lids, that's the key. If you don't, they just jump out, and it's sad times. I'm going to try to find some of these. Let's see, do I have viewer activity? Did it remember it, or is it? I clicked the button. Come on. No, it's not showing it. Well, the people that did donate 5 subs and everything, thank you so much. It scrolled. I might be able to scroll up and get some. Oh, here's one. Haven't tuned in for a while. Busy getting ready to teach 300 plus Psych 101 students soon. What are the big Aquarium Co-op updates for the past 3 months? New light. Zenzo became director of basically customer service and marketing. Some new swag. Mostly a mental shift, I would say. The mental shift was we're not looking to grow. That's not stated right. The focus is not growth. The focus is serving our customers better, which usually leads to growth. So, we want to make sure that everyone's getting a good experience at the local aquarium store. We want to make sure that our products are doing well and not trying to add new product lines on. We're not trying to grab a whole bunch of new stores. We're trying to just focus on what we're already doing. We're looking internally and going, if we're outsourcing that, could we do it ourselves? Or if we are outsourcing that work, could we find someone who's better at it, or are they doing a good job? And because when you're growing all the time, you don't spend a lot of time sitting there and going, yeah, but is this process efficient? Is this good? Should we be doing that? Does it make sense to do that? I don't know. So, and then what else? Yeah, the wholesale thing has been a huge thing, but that's been a little more than 3 months. Welcome new members. Okay, that's as high as I can go. So I can't go in the Wayback Machine. So my apologies to those who spent the money. Well, I don't apologize for that. I thank you for that. And but I can't call you out. Will Hydra wipe out baby pleco fry? Not in my experience. I haven't had that problem. That's right. Quality, not quantity. Yeah, I would say that's a good statement. We're working on some subtle changes. Like one of them that I don't know if it's going to pan out. But an example, do I have one in here? Yeah, I do. You get to see my sweet Costco sweatpants. So like one thing that we're working on with the Aquarium Co-Op heater. Oh no, stuff's coming out. I want to get some samples. So it says Aquarium Co-Op right there. I want to see it in a like a darker color, so it doesn't stand out as much in people's aquariums. The other thing we asked and we want to see, can we tint the plastic more so that when the LEDs are on, they're not as bright. Like the goal would be, in a perfect world, and it might take a few versions to get to this, is you have to like look and focus. It's almost like, let's see if this will do it. Oh no, it got bright. So my dog Wincy, it's nice and bright right now. Too bright in an aquarium. But if I dim it, you see how it's harder? I want it to be like you'd have to focus and look to see the temperature so it's not just blazing for you. Now, that might take a couple of versions, so the next one might come out, oh, it's a little bit too dark, or it's still not dark enough, or... So we're trying to focus on, refining some products, and, the best way I could state that is if it was, like an Apple product, if our light and our heater and everything, it's like, well, that was version 2. Now we're going to put out version 3. Like, well, what's better? We just tried to make it a little bit better. Nothing groundbreaking, but we took feedback and we go, could we do a thing? And that's all we're trying to do on a bunch of those products of like, well, how do we just, like, what do I think could make that, or what's a little annoyance I have, or packaging, or those things, which they all take up time. That's the thing, because we got to test it. We got to do all of that. So hopefully that's what we're working on this year. Anyone have issues with young yo-yo loaches getting into the Aquarium Co-Op heater and pecking at the internals? I haven't had that problem myself. I've kept them with horseface loaches. I think that's the only loaches I've kept them with, but I didn't run into that. There's always going to be, can't test every combo, I suppose. Any cool plans for the totes coming out of the fish room? Dean's getting some. We're installing 20 of them or so in the store expansion. And then I'm not sure what the other ones yet, but store expansion is another good example of kind of focusing instead of growing, which I realize that's a growth thing from last year. We've been working on it for a year. But when you want to finish up some of these projects and see them through, and we probably won't have enough lights for our own store. So that might get delayed a little bit. We were hoping to kind of do it in March and be like, here's this grand reveal, but we won't have the lights for it. So we could not sell them to you guys, which that seems, we could just wait a little more. And so we'll probably end up waiting and just letting plants and more stuff grow in and stuff like that. Do Cory cats like more flow in an aquarium? My Cory habrosis Corys started constantly swimming up and down the hang on back overflow current. I think most fish like having a current, but also like having stagnant areas. And not most people, a lot of times on the net, people just say you can't have too much filtration. I believe you can. If there's no slow parts in your aquarium, the people that have, 3 FX6s on a 125, it's a tornado in there. I think over long periods of time, your goal was to keep super clean water. Meanwhile, you're swimming your fish to death and they die halfway young. So I think there's a happy balance. It will obviously depend on type of fish, size of tank, type of filtration, how long between cleanings. If you wait a year, those things sort of trickle compared to brand new cleaning or, brand new out of the box. And, yeah. I'm looking for a glass lid that opens on the side, not the back. Is that a product I can find? No, you'll have to make that. Not too difficult to make. Or you can have a glass shop make it. But yeah, we're going to do a video once we catch up with these totes and everything about, I need to modify a lot of my glass tops for auto feeders. So we'll make a video on how we're doing it and what, common modifications you might want to see. The reason you won't see a lot of, aquariums kind of hinge front to back, the side to side things, because most lights are long, and so it doesn't work that way. Now you might have a pendant light, or you might be hanging it from the ceiling, or whatever you're doing, and so it might make sense for you. But that's generally why you're not going to see a lot of them mass produced. Let's see here. Any experience with black mollies and when females are about to drop? It's been around the time frame. I just want to save the fry. Well, if you had a quarantine tank, that'd help. You could move her there and let her drop the fry. If you have lots of, cover and plants and rock work and that kind of stuff, she'll usually give birth there. You could build a big kind of fry basket system. I think you have to build it though, because a molly can get pretty big, and most off-the-shelf things, in my opinion, are too small to not cause extra stress. But choose one of those options depending on what suits you. You might go, wow, I have this really dense planted aquarium. Probably okay. Or if it's fairly sparse, you'll have to intervene. Any chance for larger quantities of easy root tabs? It's not impossible. I'm surprised. I wonder how many we'd actually sell more than 60. So there's 60 counts, right? I think. What do you think? The other thing, a lot of times people ask for like, can I get this in a larger quantity? And the answer might be yes, but usually when people ask, it comes with, yeah, it is 60 tabs. It comes with, but there'll be another price break. And usually with our products, we enter the market already cutting it down to the bone, that there won't be an additional price break. And so a lot of times we won't launch a whole new package and all of that because it won't save money. And so like, let's say we had a 200 count on the root tabs. Whatever the math is, it would probably just be the same. And so it would cost us more money and more space in the warehouse. And, and sometimes it actually goes up in cost because we're buying, let's say, the size of the 20 count and the 60 count by the container load. And it's, kind of the more pricey something comes or becomes, the less you sell of it. And so if we don't want to buy a whole container of this larger container, then the price might actually cost more. Yeah, I'd buy a bag of 500. You can right now. You just buy, in 60 counts. The other thing we run into, like we tried this with Easy Green years ago, of like, oh, here's 2-liter bottles and gallon. The bigger the container gets, the more likely it is to break. And so it's kind of like, let's say you're at Costco and you're gonna buy a whole big thing of pasta. They don't just put it in one giant plastic thing. They put it in, individual packs. It actually will ship better and everything. Now, there is something that we have considered, and I don't know if we'll ever pull it off, but like bulk buying in cases. So the problem with this one would be like a case of root tabs might be 7,000. So, but sponge filters and stuff like that. The problem is when we run the numbers, there's no money. So when people go, well, I'm buying a whole case, and then we go, I understand that, but we've already priced them as cheap as they're going to go. So there's no room. So, and I think this root tab is going to be the same thing of like, yeah, we can sell them at 500, but it won't get any cheaper and might get more expensive. Like if we just throw in a bag, they're likely to come undone and get crushed in packaging and things like that. But yeah, Minorma says, I go through 60 count in less than a month. I just feel bad throwing away all the empty containers. My advice would be recycle them. Maybe find another use or actually just recycle them. But yes, it's, I think, and I'm not saying that we will do this, I think I'm more likely to work on getting like a cardboard package than I am to get bigger packages. The problem that we always run into is we try to go more environmentally friendly, and then we go, oof, but when they get a little bit wet from a plant and shipping, that breaks down. So like with our root tabs, we had to put in desiccant, which absorbs oxygen, because if they get packed on a day where it's humid, right? So they're at the factory, there's some humidity, they get packed, and they get shipped to somewhere it's cold. The little bit of moisture that's in there will condense, and that little bit of moisture will cause the root tabs to stick together. So we put in a desiccant pack to absorb the moisture and the air, and that prevents that problem. So what we find is each time we try to change something, there's always unperceived things, and yeah, so probably unlikely. 1 pound brine shrimp eggs, same problem, no discount, and as of yet, like it might change in the next year or two. There might be, but during COVID, we were only fighting off increases. I don't expect you guys to necessarily have noticed, but in a time where everything you normally buy, like Katie sent me a picture yesterday because like A&W root beer, she spent like $1,200 on sodas and drinks and everything for the warehouse and the store and all of those drinks we give to our employees. And she sent me a picture because we didn't buy it. A&W root beer was 96 cents per can. Like, that's getting out of control. So in a time when like everything went up, we did everything in our power to not raise prices. And so there was a few products over the thing, and it was plants a little bit, and brine shrimp went up. It's because we fought off the first increase and we just bought more. Then it went up again, and we couldn't just absorb that one again, unfortunately. But where I'm going with this is with COVID and stuff, kind of starting to start. We're like over that hill, and we're starting to come back, and hopefully, at some point, there will be like, hey, yeah, there's room somewhere that we can do that, because I've been fighting for that for a long time. I'm like, I want the 1 pound can. Like, that's something I've always bought and I've always used, but it makes no sense for us to do it. The problem we would run into, we can make a 1 pound can if we lower the quality of eggs, and we know no one's going to want that. So because we're chasing these super stupid high quality eggs, there's just no savings to be had. Oh, it was 92 cents, not 96. That was way off. Our Aquarium Co-op going to send to Denmark at some point. We don't know what the future holds. Possibly, possibly not. If I got to choose, we'd have a partner store or wholesaler there that would make things easy. Otherwise, we end up shouldering all of the burden, and it's really difficult to keep up with rules and regulations changing around the world on all kinds of different products. Like, oh, what do you mean they changed it on food products or chemical products, and it becomes costly when you're not in compliance, and you're just like, I didn't know I was out of compliance. Now we are in compliance. So we're always looking for partners for that. Any word on more air pumps coming in? I think it'll be in March. Wait, April. March or April. They so we've got lots of stuff being made. The problem is material shortages. And so, like, for a long time with the air pumps, we've been waiting on chips. Like, yeah, we can make the housings, we've got this part, we just don't have chips to run these. And so we have to wait. And I don't know, I haven't got an update in the last couple weeks, so I don't know if they have them and they're producing. There's Chinese New Year going to happen any moment now. But rest assured, as soon as possible. Those air pumps, they're so awesome. It's like printing money. People love them. They buy more of them. I love it. And we made them better. So I'm really excited to share that with you guys. Big Child 91 says, I can partner with you guys. You're searching. So on a serious note, a partnership in another country probably starts around at $500,000. Because you got to figure, you got to fill a 40-foot container, and we got to ship that to you. And So usually a partnership would be 2 containers, one initial thing moving, and then you're going to sell about half of that, and then you have to re-up with the next container full so you don't run out. And so it's it's also a huge investment by us too, if we were to do it. So that's why it's like, why don't you just do it? It's like, well, I don't have 30 million to launch it. So if someone really believes in our products and all of that, like we have track record, they do sell, but it's about a 500,000 to launch into a new market the way we think it needs to work. So there's been, oh, I'm a store in, this country. It's like awesome, but the reality is we need like a real partner to pull that off. Now, the good news is whoever does partner, they should do very, very well because they're going to kind of, there'll be no middlemen and those types of things. But it's a big investment. It's like starting another company for most things. And so that's why we're not just starting like start 15 more companies. Like we're focusing on our one company. What aquarium size do I switch from glass to acrylic? Typically, it's above roughly 125 gallon tanks. They start getting easier to carry. They hold thermals better, so temperature better, and they break less often. Any chance of Java Fern Trident or others? We could. We just, we've got Wendelov. I actually noticed in the Java Fern we sell, there was some Trident mixed in. Like not as in like, so let's say you've got normal leaf, normal leaf, normal leaf, normal leaf, Trident leaf. There is a potential of us bringing more Java Ferns. What we've noticed in the past, though, if we have 5 different types of Java Fern, we sell the same amount of Java Fern. So unfortunately, that means we're tying up 5 tanks, and we might have 2,500 units of Java Fern in stock for the week, but we still only sell 500. And so we kind of get penalized for each additional one we have. And so yeah, if we change marketing and we do more videos with it, and sure, it would make sense. Until then, it's a scale thing for us, I think. You already talked about it, but I want to say I'm loving the new light. I can tell it'll be great even just after 2 days. That's right. What size should I go for 2 Oscars? I really like a 125 gallon tank. Clearly you can go better, right? But, or did I say better? Bigger. But 125 and up, that's kind of, ooh, yeah, I like that size. What's the difference between Maricin, Maricin 2, and Maricin Oxy? They're all different meds. Yeah, so it's, the problem is the analogies I can use, I don't know if you'll know. Like, so if you say, what's the difference between tetracycline and erythromycin and kenomycin, right? They're all antibiotics, but they're all different drugs that work slightly different. So Maricin is an antibiotic, Maricin 2 is an antibiotic, and Maricin Oxy is an antibiotic. They're all in varying strengths. They can hit different types of bacteria. The biggest difference would be that I haven't tested all 3 of them to see if any of them are lethal with other drugs. So we run this all the time. Yeah, I heard I needed Maricin for antibiotics. So I bought Maricin 2, and I go, great, that's not the same thing. And then same thing with Oxy. And it's kind of like saying, your doctor says, hey, you need erythromycin. And you'd go, great, well, I'm going to use this other antibiotic from when I was at the dentist. Completely different antibiotic, and with human antibiotics, some of them going to clean out your gut flora, where you're going to have diarrhea and you're going to have to like reestablish that. Some would be, are they strong enough and are they potent enough to handle the bacterial infection that we're targeting? Some might be, are these going to be longer lasting? And so there's different properties to meds. And, those 3 meds made by the same manufacturer, they all have different chemical makeups and they're very different. I want to say particularly Maricin 2 is, I think, misleading. Let me see. What's the active ingredients for Maricin 2? Let's see if I can find it. FAQ. It's minocycline. Let me Google that. So yeah, minocycline is a class of medication classified as tetracycline antibiotics. I can't put on a good show by reading, so I'm gonna have to abandon. On the Wikipedia, let's see here. It's used to treat acne, rheumatoid arthritis, if taken by mouth or applied by skin. Common side effects are nausea, diarrhea, dizziness, allergic reaction, kidney problems. Yeah. So the other thing too is minocycline was patented in 1961 and came into commercial use in 1971. Sometimes different bacteria and everything are just resistant. We went over this like last week or something like that. And so even though they're both antibiotics, you can find that some are tailored to different things, some are more resistant than other things. And back to the original, the biggest thing is because I haven't spent tons of time testing, like would Maricin Oxy go against Paraclins or Icex? I don't know. Because I stopped when I got a good trio of meds working really well. There's no value. Well, I won't say no. Not a lot of value in me spending like another 40,000 to go, well, can you mix these other drugs when I have a set that works? Do I have to have dirt beneath my substrate always? No. In fact, if you do, I recommend a 1/4 inch or less, and it can be a little messy. However, it can be a benefit. I just don't prefer it. Yeah, gram-negative or gram-positive bacteria. Yes, but I still think there's a lot of miscommunication and problems with that, because when you follow what the Wikipedia and the internet and everything says, in theory, erythromycin should just be absolutely decimating beneficial bacteria in an aquarium, and then a lot of the bacterias or problems with the fish it treats that are supposed to be of that type, it's actually the other type and it works. So my brain hasn't worked its way through that, and it gets lost in the logic because logically this shouldn't work, and yet I just watched it work. So I think I don't put a lot of weight in gram-negative and gram-positive bacteria and antibiotics, because using it in the fish room, I haven't seen it to line up really well, which means I can't teach it well, which means I'm not understanding it well. And when I sit down, I talk with giant nerds that know way more than I, they're like, that's impossible. And I go, I realize you say this, but you're looking at the fish where I treat it. No, something else. And I'm like, I'm 100% sure I isolated that, and this is what I did. I didn't accidentally do a different med. I didn't accidentally do a thing. I replicated this thing 30, in the case of like, like mouth fungus, Icex plus erythromycin treats it, and I've done it 100,000 times, and I'll be like, no, it doesn't do that. Like, okay, so it's easier for me to go, you're right, I'm wrong, I'll keep doing the thing that treats it. I don't know what to tell people. So that's where I fall in that gram-negative, gram-positive. Because for a while I was like, maybe I just don't understand, I need to spend more time on it. But you get to the end of the rainbow on it, and you're like, no, it just says that I should be wrong. But it's not wrong in my aquariums. Can you talk about your aquarium overflow on the inside of your aquarium and the lid and the strainer? I'm trying to replicate your water change system. That's the only part I don't yet understand. Let me think. The inside of my aquarium and the lid and the strainer. The lid's the only part I'm not understanding, but essentially, you got to put a hole through your aquarium. We drill with a diamond drill bit to do that. We buy them on Amazon. We drill maybe up to 6 tanks before we swap. Depends on the thickness of the glass. Thicker glass, a lot more wear and tear on the bit. Yes, I've used $500 bits that Oh, they did 10 before they got too dull, and either way. Then you put a bulkhead through. So the bulkhead, it's a piece of plastic with a rubber gasket that's meant to fit that hole that you've just drilled. So now you don't have just glass edges, and you've got kind of a seal that you've made, right? And you've got a sealed hole through there. From there, you use PVC, right? So on the outside of the tank, some PVC might go to a drain, or it might go to your sump, or it might go to a canister filter, or it might, there's a bunch of places it could go. On the inside, if we don't put anything, wherever the bottom of that hole is where the water will go. And the water can never get higher than the bottom of the hole, pretty much. You could fill it really fast, and it could, but for the sake of this argument, the hole is what sets the water line. Now, if we put a piece of pipe in there and an elbow that goes up, oh, now the water line's up here, right? So what we do is we put an elbow, and then we put a connector piece, and we put a screen. The screen is there so that fish don't swim in the overflow and leave. Now, that screen, if you pick a real small screen or something like that, and you have too many leaves or something else gunking up, you could flood your aquarium. So we tend to use larger screens. And what I like to do, so let's say this is the water level, my hand. I like the screen to be like below it and above it. So, and then the top of the tank is like, let's say up here. So that black rim that I like it so the water level is above the bottom of the black rim, but the strainer goes above that black rim so that if duckweed or something starts plugging it up, the water just goes up a little bit and up a little bit and up a little bit. So I've got weeks to clean that thing before. Now, if I made it where the bottom of that strainer was right at the top, the minute it gets clogged, I'd flood my aquarium. So it's just some PVC parts, and I don't even glue the inside so that, the whole pipe comes up. I can take it out. I can rotate it. I can set the level. Maybe it was, it's a little bit higher. You know what? I'm going to turn it a little bit. So in different videos, you guys have seen me do that, and that allows me to adjust the level. I can turn it down to change like 25% of the water pretty quickly. Gives me some options. Don't forget to press that like button. That's right. Press that like button. And then buy yourself some meds. I'm going to be sad. I'm going to be sad if next week they're like, my fish is sick. Should have bought some meds. Like, oh, could have saved a week. Wait, Cory, how do you recommend using the med trio? So I personally dose one dose depending on tank size. So if it's a 40-gallon, 4 packets of Paracleanse, 4 packets of Maricin, and I think it's off the top of my head 20 milliliters of Vic-X, and I let that marinate for a week. That's what I do. Now, if I have the med trio and I have an active infection, what is an active infection, Cory? That means you look at the fish and you go, hey, all that fungus on the mouth, right? That's a mouth infection. Or, hey, covered in ick. That's an active ick infection. So if there's something I can identify that's active, I do not do what I just said, where I dose everything and I let it sit. Instead, I go, hey, I have ick. I'm going to dose Ick-X and follow the directions on the bottle. What can happen sometimes? Let's say I bring in 1,000 zebra danios, and they're in a 55-gallon tank, and when they land, I will give them the trio, right? So 5.5 packets of each one, and then the right amount of milliliters of Ick-X. Day 2, I might come in and go, oh my gosh, they're all covered in ick. What am I going to do? I'm going to change half the water and start following the directions on Ick-X, because now I went from there's nothing known to be wrong, day 1, and I'm trying to prevent, to day 2, I know what one of the problems is. I'm going to attack that problem and follow the directions. What I've seen at scale, by putting all of those things in day 1, we might never see ick on day 2. We might never see the horrible bacterial infection on day 2. And so it's been my experience and my livelihood that by pre-treating, I prevent probably 70% of all of the illness that I ever saw when I didn't do it. That still leaves 30% that I will then still have to actively treat. But that solves so much. And then especially like in a store setting where maybe fish come in on a Friday, you're absolutely slammed all day Saturday, you don't even get a look till Saturday night. And you go, oh my gosh, we're losing them. They're dying by the hour. And if you worked in a store, you know you've had that happen where fish come in, they're fine. You get to the store in the morning, they're fine. You check in on lunch, like, oof, wow, they're dying. So you net out all the bodies, maybe change a little bit of water, and then, oh, customers, got to go, right? And then by the end of the day, so 6 hours later, you come back, you're like, 80% of them have died. Yeah, it's a bad spot to be, because most times you go, well, yeah, I cleaned the bodies and I did the water change, it'll be fine. And so it sneaks up on you, and you can't just like, well, I have to stock like 100 people to work there all the time. You go out of business. So you've got enough people to get through a Saturday, but maybe not enough people if there's a bunch of fish problems too. So we try to preload it on let's prevent the problems before they happen. I have one platy I thought I had ick. I treated the tank twice, but the crystal-looking things never went away. No other fish ever got it. What could it be? Could be a cyst. That's fairly common. Somehow I set up Google Alexa. You can have cysts on fins and things like that, and that's where diagnosing illness is important. I don't instantly start treating ick if it's like, oh, there's 4 cysts. Like, no. Ick usually is like, oh, there's 20. And then if I'm unsure, wait an additional day. You'll have 50 or more. If you didn't get any more after another day, ooh, this might not be ick. And then by day 3, if you didn't get any more, okay, this isn't ick. I have 8 bulkheads arriving from you tomorrow. The lid part was talking about keeping the strainer under the lid. Oh, yes. Okay. So yeah, it can be a little bit difficult. Sometimes I'll take a strainer and I'll cut it down a little bit if I have to, but I want it to be basically so that when everything is vertical, it's like right at that top. So sometimes you got to trim it a little bit. Depends on the strainer. You might have seen in some of my videos, I run low profile strainers. They're only about this tall, but they're wide and fat. There's also tall strainers. And depending on the application of what I'm trying to do is what type of strainer I'll use. So like I use different strainers in the plant tanks at the warehouse because there's plant leaves and duckweed and stuff like that can clog it up very fast compared to maybe I've got, oh, this is a fry tank. I need smaller pores so I'm not losing the fry versus on Ladybird's tank, for instance, fairly large holes because bigger fish. Ever thought of the idea of a multi-layered sponge filter, like coarse on the outside and fine on the inside? Yeah, we definitely have, thought about it, but I don't think I think it'll be hard to clean. So I try to compartmentalize, if I need fine filtering, I'll do that in a different device. If I need coarse filtering, I'll do that in a different device. If I need biological, I might do that in a different device. But when you start mixing it, you just start making compromises and like the inside, so imagine in this, like the things off the top of my head, coarse on the outside, fine on the inside. Well, imagine the inside's getting plugged up with fine debris, but from the outside looking in, you can't see that. It doesn't look clogged up. And so now you've got air coming up, but because it's so clogged, it can't pull the water through. So your sponge filter is doing nothing and you can't even visually see it. So that would be my first worry of like, we're setting people up for failure of like, it looked clean the whole time, but it wasn't doing anything. And so then you might go, well, what about the opposite of that? Fine on the outside, coarse on the inside. But at that point, the outside would clog and then the inside would not really work, or it would only come in from the top and the bottom. And so I come back to, yeah, that's why we have fine and coarse sponge filters. If you want both those action, put a fine one on one end and a coarse one on the other end. The pushback obviously is, I don't want to run 2 sponge filters. I get it. But there's always going to be compromises in any decision we make. Will Val be too tall for 20 long? Yeah, I would probably go with Dwarf Sagittaria if I was looking for that Val look in a 20 long. My brother was awesome. Gave me a $100 gift card for Christmas. I got my easy iron before New Year's. Reds in my tank look amazing. They look fake. I couldn't be happier. Good to hear it. I try to put together an indoor pond with a muck bucket. I follow every step from Dean's video on the YouTube channel, but no water is coming out of the PVC pipe that's bent in the bucket from the side. Well, you're dealing in flow there. So you've got a few things. Diameter of the pipe. You've got curvature of the bend. You've got the height of water in the muck bucket. You want that to be as full as possible, so it's the minimal distance that it actually has to push it over water. You've got the type of air stone, and you've got the strength of an air pump. You have the strength of an air pump breaks down to some subcategories. Things like a check valve would affect that. Strength of the air pump would check that. The amount of tubing would affect that. Yeah, that's the main areas there. So by looking at those factors, make sure the muck bucket's full as possible. Make sure you got the proper sweep on the return. Making sure that you've got the right air stone and the right air pump flow going. All of those will help get that flow to be a nice flow going in the direction you want. Make sure you didn't restrict the intake too much. Like maybe put a fine sponge instead of a coarse sponge, maybe something like that. But it's going to be tweaking that. One of those is going to solve your problem. Maybe it's, oh, I just removed the check valve and that was preventing too much flow from going through, and now it does work. You got to play with it. Let's see here. I've got a 40 breeder with tons of crypts. What would you use as a good background plant? So one of my favorite background plants is actually a crypt spiralis. It kind of looks like Val a little bit, right? But it grows super slow. So I like the slow growing crypts, and then as it kind of just fills in the back, it just stays like that. Where Val can get going, like, I'm constantly trimming this thing. Oh, jeepers. So I really like crypt spiralis. YoLink has affordable water and temp sensors. Many other devices you can use with aquariums. Uses other tech than Wi-Fi or Bluetooth. Has 1/4 mile range. I have 6 water leak sensors on the property. All right. Dustin the Blacksmith, member of 41 months. That's good for at least 3 years of coins. Not that far off from getting that 4-year coin. Can you give me input on Dean's fry rack? Any tips that can make my process smooth on setting it up? My advice would be look up fry racks. There's probably 20 different videos on. So we've done a couple, and then there's been like 18 other people that have made Dean's fry rack system and then made videos on how to make it. And so by watching them, you'll see, okay, I had a question about that. Each person that makes a video on it will go into something a little more in-depth, and that might be the problem you were having a part with. And you'll go, okay, now I fully understand that. I fully understand this. There we go. Can I keep a pair of convicts in a 30-gallon? Yeah, probably. I was removed from the Aquarium Co-Op Facebook group. I haven't been able to get a reasoning why. I've messaged both the Facebook mods and the staff directly. Both said I need to talk to other support. Chances are you did something that we don't like. That's the reality of it. We don't have time to police the way too many people that are there to spam or talk about competitors or yell at people. Every day, basically, there's probably 5 people that get banned. I remember one person told them to set their house on fire and they hope they die. They got banned. Maybe that was you. And the honest answer is you could be a casualty of maybe they shouldn't have been banned, but we probably don't have the resources and won't attempt to fix it. That might sound callous, but if I showed you the process of that group of 30,000 people, we probably have 50,000 people that are banned because for a long time the group was open. Anyone could join it and people would spam it. And there's no good way. I can't just type in, AntZinFX and be like, oh, unban. Instead, you have to manually sort, and they're not even alphabetical. So it becomes one of those, unfortunately, when a ban does happen, do we want to task someone with 1 to 4 day, 8-hour days of trying to unban this person? And the answer is like, no, we can't, we just can't. And most times, like from what I see from mods, they go, hey, we're having a problem with this person. I've warned them. Or sometimes it's so egregious that we just ban them. And most people, where they get banned, it's because they're promoting their own videos, or they're promoting a competitor, or they're doing something that you like. When you join the group, you have to agree to the rules, and you go against that. Sometimes it's swearing. Sometimes it's just not being kind. That's one of the rules. Like, you got to be kind to people. People, and I don't know. I don't know your instance. Maybe you've never done anything. You're a member. You seem to be a normal person. Could be an off day. Could be, I don't know the answer, honestly. But the reality is, it's nearly impossible at that scale to unban, which YouTube's the same way. It's horrible. I don't know why they make it these archaic systems. Maybe it's most people don't have big followings and it doesn't become complicated. So the answer for you, Antzin, is, and it's not a good answer, make a new Facebook account, join a different group. Yeah, I don't really have a good one for you, which it's kind of a non-answer answer. How do you clean the tubing in the fry rack? Mine clogs often. You can do like some little pipette type of things, but the main goal is making sure you have tons of pre-filtration. So the pump's got pre-filtration, you've got sponges and other things gobbling up the gunk before it ever makes it through your recirculating system on the Dean Fry system. Let's see. Really happy with the Aquarium Co-Op light. I got a 12-inch so far. Thanks for all the work and the team do to improve the hobby. Well, thank you. Any plans to make a co-op clip-on light someday? Maybe. I mean, I know one of the to-do lists on the long things is to make a clip-on light for hatching brine shrimp. That's kind of what the 12-inch light is for. But in terms of just a clip-on light, the demographic where a clip-on light makes sense and no other light does make sense is a very narrow market. And so, being that it's that narrow, I'm not sure we'll ever get to it on the list of things we could do. But maybe. Here it goes. I posted my new tank a few times and was loving the feedback on my plants and guppies growing out. Maybe it was due to my Facebook name, including the name Guppies. It could be. I don't know what the name was, but, definitely that's an advertising thing. If it's like Larry's Guppy Depot in Minnesota, like that's, it's no different than, a fish store down the road joining and being like, I just interact with your people all day long. Like, I'm right in the next city over. I don't know. But yeah, that's probably what it is. And so maybe, you use a different account and you can partake. And, our biggest thing, it's not that we, hate competitors and all of that. It's that when you allow the posting of videos and competitor stuff and all that, all of a sudden the feed becomes nothing but that, because everyone's going, well, I'll just post my stuff there every day and I'll try to get some sales. Instead, we want honest, like, hey, I post, I post pictures of what I'm doing in the fish room. I post pictures of my dogs. I want genuine, yeah, we post stuff that you guys want to buy from us, but that's kind of our thing. But I'm trying to find the right balance where we can look at post histories and you're like, oh, you've only ever done these loaded questions to make a sale. They just get banned. So we wanted that people want to be there to talk about fish and hang out and not promote, and that's in our thing. And so when people do, usually they just get the ban hammer and we move on. And I guess that's where we're at. So sorry, not sorry. It's yeah. Can I buy the green tubing that is used on the sponge filters? I would like to use it for undergravel lift tubes. We only have it in the standard size. So we don't have, we can't sell you like a 3-foot or anything like that. And so the answer is probably no, because we can't sell it to you and you probably need more than that. Is it always necessary to add an air stone to the inside of a sponge filter? If I do so, will it lessen the flow a bit? Maybe. No, it's not always mandatory. It changes the flow pattern. And when you look at flow of air and water, usually the finer the bubbles, the more uniform you can make it, the better the flow will be. It might look less, but I did a video on that, and like turning it upwards, glug, 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 and all turbulent actually moves less water. So imagine you've got 100 people trying to get through one door, and they're just kind of trying to force a couple through, and every wave, 2 people make it through, right? Where if you have a single file line and it never stops walking through the door, way more people get through the door faster. And that's what kind of happens with air going through that tube. If you can get a perfect stream going, it moves water really fast. If it's all glug, 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 glug and disoriented, it's very slow actually. And so, kind of like with that muck bucket container, you need that very steady flow to get that lift. It can lift it higher and further. You can do more with less air and less energy. More is not better on that. The band hammer must be a WoW player. The band hammer's been around a long time, but yes, I've definitely played my share of WoW. Any idea what is causing the deaths of corridors? Bobs and others are having problems? I don't. I talked to Bob, don't know. I honestly don't have time. And the one thing I would say to people, if let's say 5 different people are having problems, they're probably all independent. So, like, let's say I hold up this can of Diet Coke, and there's 768 people in the chat, and I go, yeah, has anybody else noticed the cans are dented? And 5 people go, yeah, I noticed that. It doesn't mean it's all the same, like we're all buying it from different stores and that kind of stuff. So in big numbers, when you're like, if you ask a large, who else is having corridor problems? Like if I asked, who else is having dying guppies? There might be 72 people today. Doesn't mean they're related in any way. So I would say, like, step back and go, is there anything actually in common? Are you all buying it from the same wholesaler? Are they all the same type of Cory? Do you all have the same water parameters? Do you all live in the same state? Most of those answers are probably no. And so, if we ask, like, let's say we ask the same thing. How many of you have lost cardinal tetras in the last month? And everyone raised their hand. Well, my problem's going to be different than your problem, than your problem, than your problem, than your problem. But we all raise our hand for the same problem, even though we know the result and the answer is different. So my advice is, while a bunch of people might be having the problem, attack it from what is my problem? Put on the horse blinders and go, okay, but let me analyze my setup. So even though 72 people are having cardinal tetra problems, how many of them bought them wholesale? How many bought them 5,000 at a time? How many people, did my meds and this versus the other things? Because, they did it this way? That must be the answer. That usually doesn't treat me very well. So, make sure you're actually dealing with apples to apples and not apples to apple pie. Let's see. What time do you sleep and wake up? Seems like you might have long days. Yeah. So we got a business coach, and what I've been working on over the last year really is trying to figure that out. And where we're at now is my goal is to schedule all my meetings a couple days a week. And I set alarms for those days. And then the other 5 days a week, I don't set an alarm. So today I didn't set an alarm. I didn't wake up until 10. Then I had to hop in the shower and eat breakfast. And, or was it 11? Yeah, it was like 11. But what I find is I become much more rested. Now, tomorrow, I'm not going to set an alarm. I might wake up at 8 a.m. But I'm letting my body rest. But what changes from day to day is, website's broken, I'm staying up till 4 a.m. Or, went to bed at 11 p.m. So if I know I can't control, or I have a hard time controlling how late I'll work, what I found to be most beneficial so far is stop controlling when I have to get up. If I wake up when my body is done resting, I now wake up and I'm better at forming words in a live stream. I'm better at being on camera. I'm better at, writing this email. Whereas if I don't get enough sleep, then I'm having more problems of like, what is it? LD50, that's what it was. And so that's been good for me. And we're testing it out and seeing how it works. And so far it's been working pretty good. I put a coarse sponge on the inside lift tube to stop corridors from getting in there, and it's definitely quieter. Put a coarse sponge on the lift tube. I must be missing that. Maybe that's on the lift tube of a hang-on back. My dad has commented my tanks look store quality when he walks into my room. Should I be concerned? Yeah, I mean, I would say my guess is if your dad's not in the hobby, that's a compliment. Someone goes, "Wow, these look like they could be in a store." Usually that's meant to be a good thing. Whereas if you're really in the hobby, if I say your tanks look like they belong at, Petco, PetSmart, you're going, "Oh, whoa, how dare you?" Right? But I think most people that aren't a super nerd, they would be paying that as a compliment of like, "Wow, they look good enough to be in a store." Right? I thought Cory was talking about recently wanting to do a saltwater setup for fun. I don't think it was that recently, but if I do it, you guys will never see it. It's only super fun if I don't have to film it. The minute I have to put meaning behind things, it ruins it. So like when I went and bought fish with Bob, I was gonna shoot a video and I was like, that's gonna ruin it. I'm just not shooting a video. So I went all the way to Portland, bought fish and everything, never shot a video. I shouldn't say ruin it, it just changes the intent. There's definitely pride in making a good video and all of that. But if my original goal is to hang out and go fish shopping and be my own fish nerd, which I totally accomplished that day, was super fun. Making the video would have ruined that part. Let's see here. Just found out Dean taught at my school for the culinary department. Small world. Yeah. My albino Corys have been doing good in my 55. Been laying eggs on the glass every month or so. One of the easier ones to breed. They're fun. I like the saying. Some people say, oh, that doesn't mean that. But in general, when fish are breeding in my aquarium, I take it as a good sign. Some people say, well, some could be breeding even though they're dying. That's true. But how many times do we see things where it's healthy and yet no breeding's going on and everything? I think it's a more established tank. I like the view of it, and from a lot of stuff I've bred, when you get the parameters right is when they do start breeding. Not many stuff have I bred where it's like, good, I've almost killed it, now it's cranking out fry. In my personal experience. That's right. Kyle Morris says, once you film it, you have all the experts giving their unwanted advice. So true. That happens every day. I'll read every morning. I wake up and I start reading and answering comments until I get to the people that are just making me angry of like, no, you're doing it wrong. And I'm not going to spend the hour it takes of like, no, I've done it that way. Here's the 17 bullet point list of why I did it this way for my specific use case. And so I try to live my life where I'm not giving people advice unless they ask for it. And instead, I redirect as much as I can to encouragement. And it's been better for my mental health. I think it's better for other people's mental health. Oftentimes, like in the group or something, I'll see like, oh, there's clown puke gravel with a dinosaur fighting a unicorn with a spaceship. But then there's a 5-year-old kid having the time of his life. And I'm like, yeah, you're doing it right. Love it. Love it. Because it's true. I do love seeing people get into the hobby and enjoying it. Just because I don't enjoy it. My wife eats spicy stuff that I hate and would never eat it. But I can get enjoyment going, ooh, is that really good? Oh, yeah, it's in your favorite place? Sweet. That's awesome, right? So by changing my mind frame, I've been able to get more enjoyment out of the hobby by watching other people get enjoyment. Instead of telling them, eating that spicy stuff, you might have heartburn later, or you might ruin your stomach lighting, or instead, Just, oh, that's sweet, man. I wish I could find a place that made the best taco. Yeah, that'd be great. We saw a snippet of your trip on Aquapro's video. That's right. If you watch that, that was the only video we filmed that day. We were in a grocery store parking lot. I was handing off some products for him, and he drove over an hour just to hang out with us for like 20 minutes at the wet spot, basically, which is a fish store, and then he had to go. Well, I don't want to just divulge personal things, but he had a reason he had to go. So, do I like fishing? I love the act of being out fishing and not talking and being in nature. I myself have not fished in a very long time though, because I don't like taking the hooks out. And basically, once I got into keeping fish as pets, I don't know that I've actually been fishing. Like my silent business partner, he took me and Robert and another person out on a boat, and they did fishing. But I said, well, I don't need to buy a license. I'm not going to fish. I love being out on the boat. I love hanging out with people and watching it and enjoying the sun and all of that. But I don't enjoy the taking of the hooks and things like that. The closest thing that I do to fishing is netting and stuff like that out in Peru. But we're trying to minimize that. And it's not that I wouldn't. If I had to eat tomorrow and I had to be catching a fish, I would do it in a heartbeat. But I'm trying, I think everyone tries to do this, try to do less things that you don't enjoy and do more things you do. And watching a fish squirm as I rip the hook out is not enjoyable. Just like not having to put a fish down in my fish room is not enjoyable, or not having to do something else. And so other people, again, I can get the joy from, you're super happy you just caught this fish and you're going to cook it tonight and I'll eat the fish and all that, and I can partake and I can enjoy it. But I myself don't get the enjoyment out of, like, I don't know if it's guilt or what, but I just like seeing, I don't ever want to see dog pictures in pain. I don't want to see cats, and I don't want to see any living creature in pain. That doesn't mean that I wouldn't fly swat a fly or something. No one's perfect. But given the choice, I don't want to see something in pain. That's just not, you can see that everywhere. It's so, and if you go down the rabbit hole, pretty soon it's it's just a dim outlook. So I try to surround myself and look at the good things. All right. This is the last question. I have to go have dinner with Grandma, and I say I get to go have dinner with Grandma. And so I'm going to answer one last question. This one says, corn dog, any tips for getting a single pair of cockatoo epistogrammas to spawn? My tip is hatch out live baby brine and feed it to them every day. In my experience with epistos, when there's microfoods going in every day, they start, so one, it's nutritious for them, it's good. But two, when they see there's this abundance of microfoods around, they go, hey, with all this food around and it's made for babies, we should think about having some kids. Then they do. And for me, if I have a whole fish room, sometimes I don't notice a spawn for a few days. So some fish will spawn in a cave or something, and you don't even get to see it. And you only see it when the fry, like, oh my gosh, they got fry. Those fry might have been hashed out and looked for food for 4 or 5 days already before you noticed them. You already lost most of them. So if I'm feeding the food that the fry already want every day ahead of time, those 5 days where I might not have noticed the fry, they're getting great meals. And when I do see them, wow, look at that. They're looking fat and sassy and healthy. I got a brood of 40 of these things. Great. Having a great time. So the live baby brine, that would be, if I brought a pair of epistos home tomorrow, hatch out live baby brine. If my goal is spawning them, feed them the live baby brine, and then also I've already got the food and it's hatching daily for when they do hatch out. And so even though they're going to lay eggs, it's going to take, days for them to hatch out, I'm still feeding the parents. The parents know there's tons of food coming for them. They have babies. They know I don't need to eat the babies because food's coming and good food's coming every day. All of those things. So, all right. Thank you for supporting what we do. Buy all of the meds that you're on the fence about buying. And we'll see you next Sunday. Get those tanks cleaned. I know I'm working on it. Compliment someone else's tank. You can. Maybe that'll be a new thing. I need that to be a new sign out. Compliment someone else's tank, not your own. And I bet you that'd make the biggest difference we could make in this hobby. If everybody made it a goal that when you interact with some other fish nerd, maybe it's twice a week, maybe it's once a day, that your goal is to compliment them. Like I know my wife, she's way better than I am. She likes to give compliments to people in real life every day. I don't have that level of confidence, but boy, is she good at it. And I could do that in aquarium. So maybe I'm going to make that my thing of go out of my way to compliment someone else's aquarium hobby every day. So hopefully you'll join me in that. We'll make the world a better place. I'll see you next Sunday. Off to Grandma's house we go. Got to find the button because I never would line that up before the last minute when I want to click it. Buy all of our stuff. Do good things. See you next week.